Hey, hello guys. I'm Marcell Vollmer, Chief Innovation Officer at Celonis. It's a great pleasure being today here with Paul Scanlan from Huawei. He's a CTO for the carrier business, and I think 5G is a hot topic, and we would love to jump into that. Paul, probably you want to quickly introduce you, and thanks for having this interview with me today. So, Paul.
My pleasure, Marcell. Thank you very much for inviting me. I look forward to sharing some ideas on 5G in the industry with you and your followers.
Awesome. That's really great. So why don't we start right away? So this year, everyone talks about 5G, and it's really time now that we actually start deploying 5G for different industries. So in the light of the current situation, how and where could 5G potentially be used to maintain normally daily operation, get benefits, or even add value across industries, whatever the industries is? I think due to the Corona crisis, healthcare is definitely one in the focus, manufacturing, because the mask, what we want to produce, but there are so many more opportunities. So probably you have some thoughts on that, how it can be deployed and what is the plan to roll it out?
Sure. I mean, let's take a little bit of a history. Maybe 2 years ago, back in towards the end of 2017, we finalized the standards for the first group of standards for 5G. And then in February, you might recall, during MWC, Huawei showcased an end-to-end ecosystem. So we had devices, both fixed CPE and mobile devices, chipsets, and things like this, radio base stations, transport network, and core network. So we were demonstrating already within about 3 months of the standardization of by the 3GPP of 5G. We're demonstrating end-to-end ecosystem. But the challenge that we had back then in early 2018 was really how to get telecom operators to invest, right? Because it's not that it's CapEx heavy, but the point is you need investment. You know, you need people to move from 4G to 5G or from 2, 3 to 4 to 5G. So how do you do those sorts of things? And at that time, we worked with a company called Boston Consulting, and we engaged them, and we worked together to try to give them some real data, you know, about the product, how it worked, pricing, deployment options, and things and then asked them to try and figure out, well, you know, what's the use case for 5G? This is, as we say, in the mid 2018 at that stage, and they came back and said, basically, the bottom line, Marcell, was if you have growth, data growth in any economy, then you need to service that growth with a technology. So the question then is, which technology do you use? If you use 4G, then you know, there's a certain amount of capacity and it comes at a certain cost. And if you use 5G, then it has a lot more capacity and it comes at a cost. And their modeling showed that if the growth rate was more than about 25% in any market, then 5G was cheaper than 4G. So I think that's a very simplistic analysis, and not a simple analysis, but a simple picture to paint in terms of what's the first business model that's low hanging. And then we were looking at, in the second phase, well then, how do you deploy 5G? And of course, the arguments were moving that, well, you know, 5G is used in 3.5 gigahertz spectrum, so it doesn't propagate as far as other spectra like 2.6 or 1800 or 900 and 700, of course. That's a radio physics problem. But what we were realizing was that as we were developing these products in these higher frequencies, that of course the products go from being a couple of meters down to something about this big or even this big. So suddenly the base stations, the radios themselves, are becoming smaller, which meant you could deploy them in different ways, like on lampposts. And towards the end of 2018 and early 2019, we were seeing an uptake, particularly here deployments in China, with radios that were on lampposts. So, you know, a cheaper end-to-end solution to meet demand. That's a good business model. An alternative deployment methodology that allows for collaboration in different industries and allows for much more rapid types of rollouts. So that also wasn't a bad sort of direction to follow. But of course, 5G was hyped up to be faster, lower latency, and cover massive connections. And your question really comes to this point, you know, what do we see in the industries and the application? So towards, I would say, the mid-half of last year, you saw many companies around the world that were deploying 5G networks, but they were deploying them largely to satisfy these sorts of devices, right? So, 5G handphones, yes. And that's called EMBB, sort of enhanced or extended mobile broadband. The bottom line there is we try to provide a better experience for mobile customers. But of course, the number of handsets are few. From last year, of course, you've got a larger ecosystem. But industry, where does industry benefit? Many people talking about manufacturing, health, education, transport, energy, renewables, etc. So what's really happened in last year, a lot of pilots undertaken by different companies who have different strategies looking towards this B2B market. So the B2C market was pretty clear. It's really a mobile phone. Although a lot of people were arguing that, and I'll say hypothesizing, that augmented reality and virtual reality would be a big market segment. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So last year was largely pilots of different B2B type of engagements.
Awesome, Paul. That's very exciting.
I don't know if you want me to continue, because otherwise you won't be able to get any questions, and I would talk as my colleague would forever. But
well, you're absolutely awesome, and as a chief technology officer, so no surprise that you are diving a little bit deeper, which is highly appreciated. I'm pretty sure that anyone who sees this podcast will be, or this video will be delighted about the insights you can share. Probably to make it a little bit more specific, do you have any showcase? And is there a respective new business model which is in particular enabled by 5G?
Sure. So, okay, let's get down to some very specific. So I mentioned that in 2018 we engaged with one consulting company to get some independent ideas. And that was really about the business model, as you just first asked for. The second part was last year we engaged a company called STL Partners out of the UK. And we asked them very specifically just to look at B2B businesses. And I asked them, I didn't want any generic information. I don't want them to go to the internet and troll through data and give me statistics. Mm-hmm. What I wanted was them to definitively figure out which industries would be benefited from 5G and explain why. So that meant they needed to go and talk to customers. They needed to talk to senior executives across different industries to understand, firstly, what's their understanding of 5G, because if you don't understand it, then obviously it can't make an impact to your business. And the second one was, if you do understand it, then what do you expect this thing called 5G to do for your industry and for your business? Mm-hmm. So they identified a couple of markets that they believed were ideal for this, and one of them was manufacturing. The other one was healthcare, then energy, renewables, and transport and logistics. So last year they undertook some of the studies, and this year they'll carry on the studies. But if we take an example of, say, and I'll touch on manufacturing a little bit, and then I'd like to move into health, because you asked a question about given the situation today, what's happening. So if we just look at manufacturing, the key is that the manufacturing industry really understands or has an expectation of what 5G will do for their business. So if you look at a classic manufacturing plant, it's got lots of robots in it, and the robots have sensors. And the reason they have sensors are for many reasons, but one specific one is to monitor the performance of the robot from a maintenance perspective. It's called predictive maintenance. And some of the CEOs were quite bullish in saying that, they expect that this thing called 5G will have much lower latency, and I can put more sensors into more robots. So you imagine a factory floor with thousands of robots, and each of them has, many sensors. This thing called 5G, in their opinion, they wanted to collect data from the machines and analyze so that they could predict in advance when failures would occur or tolerances would be out, so that they could improve their basically efficiency. And some simple numbers were, if they could improve this predictive maintenance by 1%, then they will save billions of dollars. And I'm not talking a couple of billion across the industry. I mean, globally, it would be very significant in the tens of billions of dollars. That's obviously a very simplistic thing to do, to put sensors in a robot, because it's already done. It's known how to do. You just want more sensors. You need better latency, and that's what 5G does. You need to be able to connect massive connections, and that's what 5G does. So the industry understood it and had very high expectations. The challenges we have are that it's an in-building solution or an in-building problem, an in-building challenge. And today, the telecom operators, as I mentioned, were really rolling out, these big macro sites outdoors because their first go-to-market strategy was about, B2C, so consumers. So now you need to get the telecom operators to build these networks indoors in factories, which they can do and they will do. But you understand that the focus is different. To understand the problem is different. So therefore, the go-to-market strategy is different. And perhaps what's probably more topical would be right now is about health. And the second use case, the reason they picked health was for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's very complicated. It's a complex ecosystem. It's very traditional. It takes a long time to do things. And as you can see with the current virus problem, perhaps technology can be used in a different way. And a couple of things that they saw was, first of all, that the industry did not very well understand 5G. So it didn't really understand what could latency do, or low latency, or massive connections, or even high throughput. But after some discussion, it's very clear. High definition television, high definition cameras, high definition video telephony, as we're doing now with you, Marcel, that's very important in doing things like virtual consultations. And I think you can see in an example today, which I don't really want to take advantage of, but just to say that when you do have a high volume of patients and you have fewer practitioners, this is a resourcing problem. So the challenges in the industry are really related to resources, lack of generalists and specialists, lack of infrastructure, lack of budget. And the expectation that 5G would be able to address these things by providing more people to get access to healthcare, then you save lives. You save lives, and obviously that translates to a whole bunch of different things. It's an efficiency thing, saving lives and quality of life plus efficiency. So the industry can save tens, if not $100 billion because the industry is so large. We have an aging population. People are moving from fixing problems to preventing problems and wellness, as opposed to the challenge we have right now. So high definition video to do virtual consultation, remote patient monitoring, these sorts of things, that's where the business opportunity is. Now, that requires also a different way of building the networks, the 5G networks, and educating a different type of customer group. Because, you now need to provide 5G solutions inside hospitals, inside medical clinics. You need to educate, and have an ecosystem of different type of mobile-based and perhaps PC-based and TV and or large screen-based medical solutions between patients and specialists, and between generalists and specialists, etc. So that was seen to be another very large opportunity. And if you brought it right to today to say, well, or let's take, why would operators not do that? Again, the challenge to go into a hospital and fit it out with 5G, it's not a technical challenge, it's a business model. You ask me, what's the business model? Well, everybody wants to know, how much money will I make if I invest $10 million here, $100 million there? Where am I going to get my money? The manufacturing one is quite clear. You put in sensors plus 5G, you can make significant amount of savings to the industry, some of which will be passed on to the telecom companies and some to the ecosystem partners. In the medical or in e-health, it was less clear who's going to make the money and how to do it, because it's a complex ecosystem. But I think one of the things that the current situation has demonstrated is people are able to go home and work from home. Students are able to study from home, and we're still able to get on with our lives. And this is an example. We're running high definition video now between you and all your followers and myself. So telecom operators today, and probably for the last couple of months and for the next couple of months, will have a lot of data about usage, from the network. And one of the things that 5G does better than 4G is video, and it does it better for uplink. And of course, you're talking to me, I'm talking to you. We're not connected to a server. We're not downloading movies from Netflix or from Amazon Prime, where it's user-generated content. And user-generated content is much better served by 5G networks. So I'm expecting that telecom operators over the next few months will have a lot more data. And of course, the use case will be easier to prove because they see that people are doing this. They'll be able to see it by different industry segments. So it'll be